This is a Nitto Trail Grappler. This is also a Nitto Trail Grappler. So the question is, why is it different? Today we're going to cover Nitto's newest tire. And no, I'm not talking about the Trail Grappler G3. We've already done a video on that if you're interested in that tire. Today we are actually talking about the Trail Grappler 42 by 13.5 R17. This 42-inch tire, there's a design choice that they put on this tire that actually kind of surprised me quite a bit. And then there is a design choice that they left off of this tire that was equally surprising. We're gonna dive into the different details between all three of those different types of Trail Grapplers. I know that the Trail Grappler has been out for 16 years, so a lot of people are probably thinking, what could this guy possibly be telling us that we don't already know about this tire? But I bet you will be surprised by some of the stuff that you learn. Okay, let's get the most confusing thing about Trail Grapplers out of the way right at the beginning. There are three styles of Trail Grapplers. First up is the one that most everyone knows that looks like this. This is the one that's been out since 2009, available to the general public in all kinds of sizes, including the brand new 42-inch size that just came out this December. Next up, there is a tire that I don't have here. And the reason I don't have it is I can't get it. Nitto doesn't sell it to the public. It's what's called a K-Spec Trail Grappler. This is a tire that everyone's using when they go and race at King of Hammers, if they're a sponsored official Nitto driver. It looks just like this one, but it's different. And the reason it's different is it has a different compound. That means that the rubber that it's made out of is a completely different rubber. The rubber that they make the K-Spec out of isn't approved by the Department of Transportation. So it's a non-DOT tire. It's a race-only tire. I hope that makes sense. What that means is you can't drive it on the road. The reason you probably can't drive it on the road is it's a much softer rubber. It's basically a sticky version of this tire, okay? And it's probably too soft essentially for driving on freeways. It's also probably too soft for driving in winter when it's really, really cold. It probably glasses over and gives you terrible traction. That's generally how it works with super soft rubber tires. If you're familiar, BF Goodrich has a red label tire. That is a non-DOT sticky tire. It's a competition tire. So does Mickey Thompson. Mickey has their Mickey Stickies that everybody calls them. Same thing, non-DOT tire. The thing that's funny about that is BFG and Mickey's sell theirs to the public, whereas Nitto, you can't buy their K-Spec tire. Now, a lot of people out there are very confused because when they buy this tire, this is the 40-inch Trail Grappler. This style came out in 2013. This style on the 40-inch tire, this very specifically is an exact copy of the K-Spec tire, but still using a rubber compound that's approved by the Department of Transportation, and we can all drive it around, okay? So the three styles are the original, the true K-Spec race tire that's not available to the public. It's a non-DOT tire. And then the K-Spec style tire that is DOT approved. There you go. That's the difference on all three of the tires. This tire, the brand new one that came out, the 42-inch, I was very curious what style they were going to release it in. Were they going to go with the style that most all of us know, or were they going to go with the K-Spec style tire? As you can see, they went with the most common style that we know. And we're going to talk about that in a few more minutes when we dive into the choices on the design for the 42-inch tire. There's a lot of fascinating stuff that happened with this tire. Like I said, I already teased, there's one thing that they put on it that shocked me, and there's one thing that they left out. Before 2009, Nitto had the Mud Grappler as its flagship MT tire. The problem was it was more of an extreme MT tire. I think we can all admit that it looked really rad and sold a lot of tires because of that, but it was not very rad to drive on the road. Because of that, Nitto decided to give us the Trail Grappler, a tire designed to excel off-road, but not totally compromise your on-road performance. I'll show you a couple reasons why it stood up the test of being a mud tire that's pretty good on the road. First of all, it's got a slight interlocking pattern in here. They actually used computer algorithms essentially to design the layout of this tread to make it quieter. They ended up making this tire about 30% quieter than the old mud train tire, which Makes a huge difference. A lot of that has to do with how you channel the wind and how things resonate and can they cancel stuff out. They made it a smoother rolling tire, so less rolling resistance than the old mud grappler. That actually means more miles per gallon. I'm not gonna say it's excellent because it's a mud tire and all mud tires are generally pretty bad, but it's still a lot better than what we had before. The other thing about this tire is they gave us these lugs on the side that are almost all in line with each other. There's this tiny little couple millimeter pad on every other one that's just a continuation of the side grip on the tire, the sidewall, but the actual lugs themselves are in line with each other, which means you're gonna have better cornering. When you turn onto the side of your tire, you're not gonna feel that classic like dunk, 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 dunk that you feel with a mud tire. They also gave us some actual functioning sipes on these outer lugs. The sipes on the inner lugs are not full depth. They're only like about a third of the way down. So after you wear a third of the way through the tire, they're just gonna disappear. But the ones on the outer lugs right here, these ones actually go full depth on the sides, and they just have a little pyramid in the middle that connects this part of the lug and this lug together to make sure there's enough strength there. So that gives you a little bit more grip on those outer ones for cornering, if you're cornering in like wet environments or icy or snowy roads. Again, a normal like all-terrain tire is gonna provide much more grip in those conditions than this one is. But for a mud tire to at least add in some of those features, it's a nice to have. So obviously a lot of people bought this tire and then they started to play around with it and then they started to discover additional uses for this tire. And one of those things was it started to become a popular tire in the racing world, specifically like the King of Hammers crowd, where you need an extremely durable tire that can do complex and complicated rock crawling, but you also need to be able to go extremely fast in the desert. And that is a really complicated thing for a single tire to be good at, because at high speeds, you don't go to those extremely low PSIs because you'll just break your wheels. So this tire, when they're racing it, they're probably running it anywhere from 17 to 25 PSI, somewhere in that range. So it's not like there's the tires that are specifically made to air down really low and rock crawl, super technical terrain at low speeds. People are running those on beadlocks. They're running them at like 3 PSI, 4, 5 PSI. They balloon way out. They give you a lot of extra traction, right? And that means that they need to have a more pliable sidewall so they can balloon out like that. Not quite as stiff of a sidewall. Well, this tire has an extremely stiff sidewall and an extremely thick sidewall. Well, that meant it made a really good tire for off-road racing. This tire over here, this is an old set of the Trail Grapplers that we had on a Jeep, and it's literally the tires that we couldn't kill. These things have been abused to just absolute, tragically badly taken care of. And we've never had to plug them. They've never popped. They don't leak, but we're saving them because they're still not dead and we can still use them on another vehicle. We got one XJ that's dying, and we've got another one that's coming to life. This thing's getting pretty cool. It's an amazingly durable tire. So when the King of Hammers crowd got a hold of it, they started racing it, they started winning podiums, and thus the K-Spec version of the tire was built. The K-Spec version is really a similar tire as far as like the carcass of the tire. It's a very similar tire. They changed the lug patterns just a little bit for the mayhem that is King of Hammers. The outside lugs are thicker. Those aren't thicker because they air down so low that they drive on them. Those are thicker just to armor the sidewall from bouncing off of rocks and all the extreme stuff they do in King of Hammers style races. The other thing that they did do for a little bit added traction off-road is they actually deviated. Remember, this one was designed to be built for good on-road behavior as well as off-road. Well, they took a little bit of a step back from that for the King of Hammers or the K-Spec version because all they cared about was off-road racing. So they went back to the offset lug pattern where these lugs stick out significantly farther than the ones below them, and they alternate every other one. That gets you some extra grip that can definitely be noticed, but also it makes it not as good of a road behaving tire. So it's always a give and a take. This one's better on the road, this one's a little bit better off the road, but also this one was designed for people to race and win King of Hammers, and that's really not typical of everyone else's everyday use of their tire. So in your case, when you're shopping for a tire, you kind of have to decide where you're gonna go. One other thing you'll notice is they did away with this one where it has somewhat of a functioning sipe on that outer lug. On this one, it does not. It's back to the just 1/3, very somewhat artificial sipe. And that's mostly for lug integrity, for just making these outer lugs as strong as possible. If you think of the abuse that they're taking in a King of Hammers race, you don't want to compromise the strength of your outer lugs in any way, shape, or form. So basically, over the last 16 years, an off-road tire that was designed for on-road comfort and off-road performance somehow morphed into a pedigreed, podium-winning race tire. But the question is, what does that have to do with the new 42-inch tire and two really surprising design choices that they made on it? We're gonna jump into that next. Okay, so let's talk about this new 42-inch tire. A couple quick things that you need to understand. We are not sponsored by Nitto. They have influencers that they sponsor that are in a team and all these different things. We get sent tires more like a journalist does. Like, we get sent tires from all the different brands to write about them, to talk about them, to review them, to compare them. What that means is, like, we're not getting paid to make this video. You will see the little paid sponsorship tag. We put that on all of our videos if they contain a product that was given to us for free. One way that you can tell it's not an actual sponsored paid review is I'm gonna talk about other brands and compare this to other brands here in just a second. And it's a really critical difference, specifically with this 42-inch tire. So let's dive into the interesting choices on the 42-inch Nitto Trail Grappler. First of all, the sidewall thickness on the 42 versus the 40 appears to be identical. This is a 3-ply sidewall. They're very thick plies. This is one of the reasons it got so popular in racing. But here was the one thing that was interesting. A 42-inch tire on a 17-inch rim gives you a massive amount of sidewall. And a lot of the other brands of tires that make 42-inch tires, they have more flexible sidewalls. So they're made not necessarily to be this stiff and not necessarily for racing and not necessarily as much about road comfort and all that stuff as this, but very specifically for that slow speed technical rock crawling. So the type of tires that I'm talking about would be like the BF Goodrich Red Label tires, which I'm actually meeting with their motorsports team in the next couple weeks, specifically about the Red Labels. So if you're interested in those tires, hopefully we'll have a video on those soon. But if you talk about the Red Label has a 42-inch tire, but only available in a 20-inch rim, which means you have a little bit less sidewall. And you have a fairly flexible, BF Goodrich has always been known for a very strong sidewall, but a very flexible sidewall. So their strength to weight ratio is very high. But one thing is, if it's that flexible, if you go to a 17-inch rim on a 42, I have a feeling when I talk to them, one of the first questions I'm gonna ask them is the reason that you don't have a 17-inch size out and are only having the 20 out, is it because the sidewall would flex too much when you're trying to steer? The tire would grip the rock so much, the tire wouldn't turn, and you'd almost be steering yourself out of your tire. The ratios there could be off. We'll find out in the next couple of weeks when I interview them. But they don't make a 42-17 right now. They make a 42-20. Mickey Thompson came out with a 42-17. So they have this size. And it was kind of a big deal because it's a size everybody's been requesting. The 17-inch wheel is super popular for off-roading. And a lot of people run 40-17s, and they've been asking forever, why can't I get a 42-17? But there was a really interesting thing. When they came out with their 42-17, they made one of their sidewall plies 50% thicker. So they actually thickened up their sidewall for the 42. And again, I think that that's because it has a more pliable sidewall and you don't have it torquing itself out of the tire. Now, with the Nitto, I was super curious when they came out with the 42, whether they were going to have to make their sidewall thicker. My hunch was that they weren't going to have to because it already is known for being super thick and somewhat stiff. Well, we've measured the sidewall on this versus this, and as far as we can tell, it's harder to measure than you'd think because both sides slope, so you have to catch it at like exact points. As far as we can tell, sidewall thickness is the same. They did not have to make it thicker to accommodate a 17-inch wheel. That doesn't surprise me just because of how renowned their sidewalls are for being thick, strong, and being a little bit stiff. So, similar sidewall. One thing that contributes to, that not having to make a thicker sidewall, also contributed to this not having to become an incredibly heavy tire. So this is a 42, 17. This is a 40. This is the one that has the K-spec lug pattern though, where it has the thicker lugs on the side and the lugs that stick out a little bit on the top. Guess what the weight is of these two tires? It's pretty crazy. This tire weighs 111 pounds with some change. This tire weighs, remember, it's 2 inches bigger. This tire weighs 111 pounds and change. So the interesting thing about that is if they'd went with the K-spec style, this is probably a 124, 125 pound tire. By going with the original style of Trail Grappler, they make an identical weight tire, and this becomes a fairly light 42-inch tire. If you can say that, that seems like a ridiculous thing to say, but it's a fairly light tire for being a 42-inch tire. The other design choice that really surprised me was obviously the choice to not go with the K-spec style tire. 42-inch tires are classically going to be used for off-roading pretty much exclusively. Hardly anybody's driving around in town on a 42-inch tire. They're going to be used for rock crawling. So you would think, a lot of people would think, they would have went with the more aggressive K-spec style. But the thing that I would say, there's two reasons. One, obviously the weight savings. Awesome. The other one is this style tire is thinner on top. It's an inch thinner when you spin it around like this. From the thickest point here to the thickest point here, it's an inch thinner, basically, than this tire. Now, how thin it is exactly, that's going to depend, because you could have it on a 9-inch rim, you could have it on an 11-inch rim, it's going to be different. But if you put it on an identical rim on this one with identical air pressure to this one, it ends up being about an inch narrower. So when you have a lot of people that have built Jeeps to run 40s, and all of a sudden they're starting to play around with the idea of maybe in the next set of tires I should move up to 42s. A lot of them, to be able to go add 2 more inches of clearance for tires is unrealistic. They're going to have to get the Sawzall out and completely redesign their Jeeps. But that would be true if they were running this 40-inch tire with the bigger lugs on the side that stick out farther, and they went from this 40 to this 42, there's a decent chance this is gonna stuff better because it's thinner, okay? There's a chance it may actually fit. So there's a logical transition here from a 40 to a 42 where you can actually fit the tire, you can get that extra clearance that might be more critical than a little bit thicker padding on your sidewall and a little bit more lug sticking out on the side. Again, tires is always a game of trade-offs. There's going to be a million people arguing for the more aggressive tread pattern on the 42. But then there's going to be a bunch of you that go and buy the 42 and are pleasantly surprised that it was much easier to fit than you thought it was going to be. So I'm curious to hear from you guys. What do you think they should have done? And by the way, I only have the information that I have right now, and it's based on what is released right now. That's not to say that they're not going to come out with a 42-inch version of the Trail Grappler that has the K-spec style tread. I mean, for all I know, that could be coming out in the next 6 weeks or something, right? I don't have that information. All I have right now is that they did release the 42. It is out, it is available, and it is released with the original Trail Grappler style tread pattern. So yeah, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Do you like the choices where you got the lighter tire and the easier tire to fit? Or are you just a hardcore rock crawler and all you want is give me the bigger lugs and the gnarliness? I'd love to hear from you guys. I'm sure Nitto would love to hear from you guys. They get enough feedback. The whole reason they released this tire was because their fans asked for it and enough of them asked for it. So if that's what you want, probably ought to let them know that. Oh, by the way, if you guys want to know more about this Jeep that was in the background this whole entire time, it's going to be on a bonus video this Thursday. So check that out. It's going to be Zeph who makes the video. I have to go kind of on vacation. I have to go get a diving cert. That's why my beard disappeared. Anyhow, see you guys next Sunday.